Hello everybody, my name's Joanna Barratt and I'm here to read another chapter from my book Learning from Life. We're dealing now with the secret life of a disciple, and in this précis that I'm going to read now, Maurice, my husband, is dealing with almsgiving. We need to understand that we have two natures. Our natural character, the character we were born with, which we inherited from Adam, is the old nature. The new nature is the nature of Christ himself, which was given us when we were born again. We only have to feed and nurture this new nature of Christ within us. And if we do this, we will find, to our great surprise, that his character will naturally and spontaneously begin to manifest itself in our lives. All of the commands and statements of chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount are his very character. The secret of living the Christian life is knowing how to feed the new nature and starve the old nature. Chapter 6 begins by telling us exactly how we can do this. Jesus has a very practical plan of action. The answer to the whole problem of our secret inner life, the thoughts, desires and motives that lie deep within us, is another secret life. Our secret thought life is going to be dealt with, not by tackling it directly, but by practicing entirely other things in secret, away from the eyes of others. By doing these things, we feed the new nature of Christ within us and give God the right to work in our lives. Almsgiving is an old-fashioned word which means giving specifically to the poor and should not be confused with tithing or free will offerings. Jesus says, when thou doest thine alms, not if you do your alms. He assumes it's our normal practice. Well, I'd never heard a sermon on almsgiving before. And to be quite honest, I didn't actually know what it was. So when my minister preached on it, I came away from the church with my head reeling. I must have been a Christian for about 12 years, and yet this topic had never arisen before. To find out that almsgiving was nothing to do with tithing or giving to the church as a free will offering was quite a revelation. And I knew that if I was going to grow in my Christianity, I'd have to put this new concept into practice somehow. I didn't foresee any problems in obeying this principle of almsgiving. After all, I was earning a good wage, but I hadn't anticipated the fact that it would have to register in my brain before I could put it into practice. After my initial acceptance that I had neglected to do something Christ considered important, I made a mental note to start putting money aside out of my salary to give to the poor. Unfortunately, because I hadn't formed the habit already, it went completely out of my head. And it wasn't until about 6 months later, when I heard my pastor review some of the previous things we had learned in our week-by-week study of the Sermon on the Mount, that I finally began to put my decision into operation. Now, because I didn't personally know any poor people, I got a little tub, and each week I faithfully placed a £1 coin into it, which I would give to the poor when I came across them. Now, £1 40 years ago was of greater value than it is today. I lived and worked in a big city, so I thought that there would be no problem finding the poor all around. But whenever I was on the streets of Manchester, I never actually came into contact with any tramps or hobos. Perhaps they didn't need to rise before 8:30 a.m, as they didn't have to get up for work and were still sleeping off their meths from the previous night. Or maybe they were wandering around looking for something to eat in the bins behind the cafes and restaurants. But weeks and months passed by, and the money in my tub was steadily mounting up. I knew it was pointless having money in a tub for the poor unless the poor actually received the benefit of it. So one night, Maurice and I went out with the sole intent of looking for some tramps to give the money to. Well, we drove round the streets of Manchester for ages without coming into contact with a single tramp. We couldn't believe it. When you're not looking for these people, they seem to be around you all the time. But on this particular occasion, we didn't see one. Eventually, after wandering round for ages in our vehicle, I spotted a tramp. We stopped the car, and in desperation, I gave the entire contents of the tub, which I'd planned to distribute amongst several poor people. as I was determined not to return home without getting rid of this money. Well, this poor man was absolutely stunned, to say the least. He must have seen this as a miracle. But at last, I'd relieved my soul of a terribly heavy burden. We tried several different ways to give money away, as we realised that God was trying to teach his followers in this way to be aware of other people's needs and dilemmas. During one particular period, Maurice and I made a list of all the people who had harmed us in the past and people who had become our enemies. And each month we'd put a £5 note in an envelope without any note of explanation, and we'd systematically post it off to them. They never knew where the money came from, and we were certain that they would feel blessed rather than convicted at receiving these anonymous gifts, which was something we balked at but had to come to terms with. But it was doing us good spiritually to know that we were doing good to those who despitefully used us. And our attitudes towards these people genuinely changed for the better. Maurice and I don't really like the idea of giving to organisations, although we have done so in the past, for the simple reason that a large amount of the donations received by these bodies is swallowed up in administration, and in some instances, much to our chagrin, on alms for the government. We much prefer to give personally, even if the people are totally unaware of where the money's coming from. On occasion, we've come across people in the ministry who live by faith and have not been able to afford a break from their labours. We know the stress and strain of being in the ministry, having been in it for so many years, and can identify with the pressure that these people often feel. It can drain them, both physically and spiritually. And in these circumstances, we've asked God to help us find funds to send these people away on holiday, as sometimes rest can do far more to help them than a few quid to pay the bills. There have also been times when people have knocked on the door asking for money, for food, until they receive their gyro. As I've been living by faith myself for quite a number of years, I've had no personal money other than what has been given to me by my husband to buy food for the household each week. And on these occasions, I've looked through the cupboards to see what I can give in the way of food to practically help these people. The disappointment on their faces often showed me that they came with a tale, but at least I've shown willing and not turned them away. And I must admit, if I have money, then I will give money. It could save the poor person from becoming so desperate that they'll mug someone. You know, we very often have no idea of the torment that people suffer when they have addictions to drugs and alcohol. Pray for their deliverance by all means, but don't use your pious principles to turn a blind eye to their practical needs. Do something to help them. The beauty of almsgiving, giving to those who are poor, is that there is no chance of any reward other than a thank you or a God bless you from the recipients. That means that the only one who can reward us for caring is God himself. We could be even more secretive about our alms by putting money into an unmarked envelope and dropping it through some widow's door every week. God, who sees in secret, has promised that he will reward us openly. And it doesn't even matter if her dog gets the envelope before she does and chews it up into little shreds. The principle of almsgiving is not necessarily for the person who receives the aid. It's for those of us who give and obey Jesus' teaching. It proves whether we really do love Jesus or just say we do. Because Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. John Wesley had the principle that he would never give to Christians. He said they have a heavenly Father to look after them. He would often ask for money for the poor, but the poor to him were the poor in the world, those who have no heavenly Father to look after their needs. Jesus had 12 hungry men to consider, but he and his disciples trusted God completely for all their personal needs. Yet we know for sure that they carried a bag around with them which contained money for the poor. In fact, when the woman poured the precious ointment on Jesus' feet, Judas Iscariot remonstrated with Jesus about the wastefulness of this action, saying that the ointment could have been sold and the money given to the poor. He had an ulterior motive for saying this, of course, because he was the treasurer and also a thief. But Jesus taught his disciples to consider the needs of others practically. We must learn to do the same. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. God bless you.